Hi, Jeffrey. How are you?
I'm doing great, Carrie. How are you?
Well, I just wanted to thank you first for giving up your time. Time is
Mm.
precious to all of us. And you're in a position right now where time is even more precious. So to give it to our audience, I really, really appreciate that. This podcast is called I Didn't Sign Up for This, and you're certainly in a season of that. So I want to kind of dive right in and let you kind of have the floor. I guess the first thing that our audience is going to want to know is you have sustained a recent diagnosis, if you
Yeah.
don't mind sharing that with everyone and explaining kind of what your thought process was upon your immediate diagnosis.
Well, we tried to do this a couple months ago, you and I, and timing's kind of off. And I was actually dealing with the symptoms of what I've been now found out what it is at that time, which was
Mhm.
difficult to then talk and focus and all those types of things. Because my symptoms are
Mm.
these ongoing incessant hiccups where I can't breathe. It's just horrendous. And then sometimes my diaphragm will lock up. So I'll get multiple hiccups on top of each other and it locks up. You can't breathe. I was, after coming through some pretty horrendous things the last couple of years, a spinal infection that
Mhm.
led to sepsis that almost killed me, and then a knee infection that led to sepsis that almost killed me. I thought I was out of the woods, and I've been dealing with these symptoms, like I've been saying, for about a year, and finally got into a gastroenterologist through the process. And he thought I had pancreatitis. We started treating that. And there was one spot that he decided to biopsy, and it came back that I actually have pancreatic cancer, which was kind of a shock, as you can imagine. Um,
Mhm. Considering you are the fit rev,
yeah,
right?
considering I'm the
You
guy that's,
are somebody who spends their life dedicated to health and fitness in all
yeah.
areas.
But you know what? That doesn't mean that we're not going to have things come at us. And I think the biggest question people have, I actually taught on this in church last week, is that, we always shake our fists at God when bad things happen. Well, God doesn't make bad things happen. We live in a
Mhm.
fallen world. We live in a world where there's death and disease. Jesus said the kingdom has come. And so we can function as if the kingdom is here. We can function if the kingdom is not here. Those are two things. So I don't really
Mhm.
have a sense of fear or foreboding over this at all because, how could I be the guy who's prayed over so many people to be healed and seen them be healed? How could I be the person who's always preaching the kingdom has come? And then when the ultimate form of malevolence, on top of years of malevolence, comes and visits me, am I supposed to just crumble in that moment? Well, that would be the greatest form of hypocrisy. We think hypocrisy is you go to church on Sunday and you might swear on Monday, you use a cuss word on Monday. But hypocrisy is saying you believe something and telling people that you believe it and walking as if you believe it. And then when the world comes apart around you, you suddenly are walking like a person who never set a foot in church. And
Mhm.
so I guess you get tested. One of my favorite pastors that I love listening to is Dan Moeller. And he always says that if you squeeze an orange, you expect orange juice, not apple juice. Well, when you squeeze a Christian, you should expect Christ to come out.
Yeah,
And, I got
it's true.
squeezed 3.5 years ago, and Jesus definitely came out during that time. And it really
Mhm.
gave me a, a profound level of security in my faith. And this time it's a little bit of a different squeeze because this time I don't feel like I'm in a fight. Last time it felt like a fight, like I got attacked and I had to fight and stand back up and get going. It took a long time, it took 8 months. I lost everything, you know. But this one I said, Lord, this is your fight.
Mm.
And so
So you had
I
kind of a surrender. You felt like you just really surrendered to it immediately.
yeah. Well, Carrie, there's this moment I can remember it. I've had a number of these moments in my life where I step outside when something has happened, and I just remember I look around. What does the sky look like? What does the trees look like? What's the air feel like on that moment? I had a moment like that when my first daughter was born. I've had moments like that in very difficult situations. I've had moments like that in very uplifting situations. And so, having been told I had one thing and then called into the office and told I have another thing, I remember that morning. It was a Thursday morning, and it turns out that my doctor, my gastroenterologist, was a Christian because as soon as he said it, I could feel for a millisecond that spirit of fear just coming at me. And my immediate
Mm.
response to him I said, I'm a man of faith. How do we walk through this? And that opened up the conversation at a different level with my doctor, because he then
Mhm.
shared that he was a person of faith, why he actually even biopsied what he did. The problem with pancreatic cancer, the reason so many people die from it, I mean,
Mhm.
it's an aggressive cancer, don't get me wrong, but the reason so many people die from it is because it goes undiagnosed. I've had symptoms for a year, which is why I have to drink ice water right now to try to get rid of these hiccups that are coming because I'm talking.
Well, take your time.
So I got to learn to breathe better. Yeah. And then I walked outside and I can remember exactly what the trees looked like. I can remember exactly what the sky looked like, the temperature. It was kind of a cooler, nice spring morning in Texas. Went down and sat by a little stream and some waterfalls. And I felt, Carrie, I literally felt, and this is kind of the thing that I've really landed. I want to kind of want to talk about. I felt all of the weight that I've carried my whole life of trying to be successful, of either having a successful church or ministry, or having a successful business, or having both, and having worked so hard and have had so much stress over these things that I felt like I was called to do, and why do they not work out and such. And and in that moment, I just felt all of that go away. And I realized, why are we all so stressed out about what we don't have? Why are we so stressed out about what we feel like we're not getting, or why are we missing everything, every moment of every day? There's so much to be grateful for. And it's not like I wasn't grateful as a follower of Christ, but I just, all this pressure of do more, do more, do more. You got to succeed. You got to succeed. You got to succeed. You got to make it. You're going to make it no matter how many times you get knocked down. You're the guy that's going to. And I just felt it all go away. And I was free.
Mm.
I mean, I can't tell you the level of freedom I have.
Yeah, someone else said the same thing. Surrender is not giving up, it's giving in to God's design for your life. So it's
Yeah.
not a quit. And I think sometimes we feel like surrender is a quit, but it actually, when you're surrendering to Christ, you're surrendering to his will and not your own outcome and asking him to use you in that, which
That's
you
right.
certainly did last time you had your your septus in your body. I remember when we first met, you shared a lot of that journey about impact that you saw God use you in the hospitals with the nurses and the
Yep.
staff
Yep.
and everything. And so how does this one feel different? First you say it's surrender, but also just your attitude you feel like is different going in?
Yeah, I was kind of thrown into, I mean, I went from being perfectly at the peak of my physical prowess at the time to suddenly within a week I couldn't walk and it was an excruciating back pain. So it was sort of thrust upon me. And I was taken on this journey where you just had, you either you fought or you didn't fight. That was the deal, and really felt God's presence in that. This is different in the context that, and I think I said it before. I really said to the Lord, "This is your fight." And here's the reason why I said that. About just a couple days before, a friend of mine who spends a lot of time all day during the day in prayer, we've been friends for 35 years. She called me with a word for me. And she basically said, I don't know what you're going through health wise, but the Lord says this is the final pushback, and he's formed what he needs to form in you. And he's got you ready for what he's going to have you do. And this really amazing, you know, word and I don't get a lot of those. I give a lot of those, but I don't get a lot of them. It's this amazing word of that it was finally time that God had prepared me. And I think we have a precedent for that in scripture. You know, we see a lot of the people in the Old Testament, they're not being called to their in their 60s and 70s. And, God's done 40 years of forming them in the wilderness. Maybe my 40 years has kind of finally come up. And so, no, I lost my train of thought where I was going with this. I was trying to make a point.
Oh, yeah, that's okay.
Oh,
I
how's this
think
one
one of the
different?
things.
How's this one different?
Yeah.
I think, Carrie, it's different in that I have no sense of digging in and let's fight. That's just a given. The Lord has made me a fighter. I've been fighting my whole life. I've been left for dead most of my life. The difference on this one is I have this very like outrageous level of faith that I'm going to be okay. And if I'm not, that's really okay too. It's actually better. It's literally what Paul says, to live is Christ, to die is gain, because I've been given a gift. My eyes are fully wide open. Now, all of our eyes should be wide open because we all know that nobody gets out of here alive. But my eyes are fully wide open. Like, I'm experiencing everything more than I already have. And I already experienced quite a bit in life, but it's just a profound place to be completely free. Because what's the worst that can happen? Oh, I die. I go, I go be with the Lord. I mean,
Yeah.
when you really get to a
So you
place where it's got framed that way, it's not that bad of a deal.
right, because you love the Lord, you're ready to be with the Lord, right?
Yeah.
Like, you are like, "I know where I'm going, there's a security in who you are as a man of God and your assurance in your salvation."
Yeah. You said something about that submitting to Christ, and when submit to Christ. I've had these earrings in my ears for 30 something years. I guess they're maybe 33 years. and they're not a fashion statement. When I went to my first full time ministry position, and I was co-pastoring a church in downtown Salt Lake City, it was growing like a weed. I was also in seminary at the time, and I was just so deep and just studying the Word all the time. And I was reading, in Paul's letters about, being a slave to Christ. And if you go back and you go back into the books of the law, it says that if you were a slave in your master's house and your master was a good master, you could decide to stay with your master's family after your time of service was up, your payment was paid, or whatever debt you owed was paid. And then he could actually take and pierce your earlobes against the doorpost of his house and put a ring in them. And you would now be considered part of your master's house. And when I put those two things together, I can remember it was like as if the Lord was just yelling at me to do this. And I went and got my ears pierced because I legitimately said, I'm a slave to Christ. That's it. That's all I ever want to be. I want to be in my master's house all the time. I'd forgotten that story, but it's kind of come to fruition because, you make decisions like that in these high moments with the Lord, and you don't really ever realize that most of your high moments with the Lord are really preparation for the valleys you're going to walk through. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned the past few years. If I go back and look in my journals, I can see these powerful words from the Lord that came right before. And, I would tend to frame them around things I was hoping to happen as opposed to what really ended up happening. And so now I don't frame anything around what I think is going to happen, when I get a word from the Lord. But the Lord said he's going to see me through this. And so, I just trust that at the end of the day, Carrie, he's going to be glorified, period. Because if I've been given a gift of leaving well, it's a strange thing to be excited about how to do that. Like if you knew you were going to go on a vacation and you're going to never see anybody that you know ever again, would you have a party before you were left on that trip, that you're never coming back from? I mean, people have asked me, and I've only told a few people, not a lot of people know this about what's going on with me yet. And they've asked me, do you want to travel somewhere? You want to go on a trip? I'm like, yeah, not really. I just want to kind of be around people that I know and care about and love. And I don't know if it's just the piece that I'm not going to die or the piece that if I do, so what? Either way, it's an amazing place to live. At least that's what I'm experiencing.
Yeah, I think it was interesting because I had another guest on my podcast, Tracy. And, she mentioned a lot of the same things. Like it was just that gift of that time with family and perspective,
Yeah.
and just seeing things in a very new way
Yeah.
than ever before.
But what it really felt like for me is it felt like a culmination of everything the Lord has taken me through in my life. And I've had a lot of very difficult valleys, more valleys than hilltops for sure. And for me, this sort of felt different. It felt like all of a sudden I went, oh, this is what you've been trying to get me to. And it was just this realization that all of the things in life had added up to this culmination of this place. And I have a choice to look at this seemingly impossible mountaintop because the statistics are stacked against me if you look it up. I mean, they really are. It's a 20, it's a 26% 5-year survival rate. 20% of people who had chemo and surgery made it 5 years. 6% of people who did surgery before chemo made it 5 years. And my surgery is on Tuesday. Again, mine's very, very early stage. So it's a little bit different than most. But, when you look at that, and the funny thing is I'm not even concerned about that at all because all it takes is one touch from God and none of those things have any meaning any longer. Because there's truth, there's got to be a truth, there's got to be an absolute truth. And is there a truth in the fact that I have this disease growing in my body? Yeah, there's a truth in that. But my body's been fighting it. The fact that I've had symptoms for a year and it's so minuscule, what they found just says that this is a different pathway than most people get to go on in this situation. And so I am keenly aware of, and I'm paying attention so that I don't miss anything for when he heals me. That said, I've got this other train of thought that's always going on in the back of my head, kind of popping up. Like, have you ever had that anticipation, like when you knew you were going to go somewhere, you're going to get on like a really exciting ride at an amusement park or something? You kind of have those flutters in your stomach, like, what's this going to be like?
Yeah,
I mean, we've
excitement.
all had that. I've got that in the back of my mind too, like about life in general. What's life going to be like with no concern about all this stuff I was concerned about. Number one. Number two, what's it going to feel like when you actually make that next step, that step into what's to come? Like, I'm actually excited about that. Like, it's almost like you get to be an adventurer because once you're going, you ain't coming back, you know? It's like no different than people getting into a space capsule and heading around to go shoot around the moon. You know, once they're in that capsule, that's it. They're in. It
Mhm.
just feels like a big adventure to me, either way you look at it. And I don't know why. Here's what I really landed on, Carrie. I was hit on the very day he told me, the doctor told me I was hit with this inexplainable joy. I just walk around every day with joy. And I mean, I guess, the book of Isaiah says that Jesus was a man of sorrow and acquainted with suffering. And then in the New Testament, it says, for the joy set before him, he endured death, even death on a cross. So there was something about going that direction that was joyful for him. And in the midst of what we see as this horrendous thing, especially we're coming into Easter season right now, this
Right.
crucifixion and we focus on that and then the resurrection. But he did it for joy. We see it in all of its visceral and, visceral imagery and moral, abject failure. We see it all wrapped around that, but he went for joy. So there's something about suffering and sorrow that forms and shapes us as people that are fallen and gets us in a place. Because I got this after the spinal infection. I found joy again. And that now this, it's even a different level. It's just like when nothing can, no one or nobody, nothing, no one, anything. I don't know how to word it right. When you realize that there's nothing that can be taken from you, you're free.
Yeah.
That's the best way I can frame it.
Yeah. And I think when healing looks differently than we expected it to be, right? Like some people will say, it's so sad. It's so horrible. Somebody got this diagnosis. And I'm like, that's the revelation of truth.
That's right.
It's a revelation of truth. It is not something to be said like, this is so sad. That cancer was already in your body when we first met,
That's right.
right? And we had some challenges that day, and it's interesting how we both were like, "It's okay," because 'cause we're both believers, so we were like, "You know what?" And we had both driven to meet halfway, right?
Mm.
We'd both put in efforts. Anybody else other than 2 believers would have been so upset.
Yeah. Yeah.
Neither one of us were upset. It was
That's
like, you know what? We had this moment, we had this time, and there were issues going on with my phone. I think part of it, looking back, was kind of just the way I was shooting content was just taking up too much. But then also you were having challenges, right? Early stages of what you're
Yep.
now knowing is going on in your body. But I do look back at that and like that God's allowed us to still have this time. He restores time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And he makes it in his timing. Yeah. So it wasn't a frustration for me on
No.
that day. It was like, that's okay. We'll navigate it and we'll redo it when it's ready. And here
Right.
we are.
That's right.
Yeah.
You
He
know,
gave us that.
we have this idea that time is restrictive to God too, and it certainly is not. And we box things in based on our experience of what life is. But we all know that this isn't the ultimate life because all know the story of the garden, and we all know we were created for something different. I had a moment a couple weeks ago, and I've always been really contemplated the idea of how do you come to the Lord as a little child again? And I think we have all kinds of speculation, but I sensed the Lord kind of showed me something. He was reminding me of something I used to say when I was a teenager and even in my early 20s. I always said, I just feel like life has stolen my innocence. As a kid, I would say that. Like as a middle school kid, as a high school kid. And then when I got, I've told you the story of the guy trying to kill me when I was 23 and chased me down with his truck and ran me down. And I ended up in a coma in the hospital, almost lost my leg. And it was just, that's how I started my life as an adult. But I think I finally got an understanding of what it means to come to him as a little child. It means to come to him before, for each of us, we can have a memory of when our innocence got stolen, or we remember what it was like before our innocence got stolen. I think that's where he wants us to get back to. Have that sort of childlike innocence, that fantasy, that ability to believe, like that dreams really do come true, and all this stuff we write our movies about, and all little, and maybe not to try to box in what those dreams are supposed to be, you know?
Yeah, because I think it's interesting you say that because that's a big, big part, I feel like, of my walk as a Christian as well, is I feel like I'm almost returning to who God created me to be, right? There's something I like to call lie-based thinking, and that means people have told us lies or situation have told us lies in a way to rob us from our true divine calling
That's
and
right.
our innocence, our joy, our belief. For me, it really was this belief that anything is possible, even the most extreme. That's how Christ created me to be, and
Right.
that's how I have returned to be. But I had to actually go through a period of time, much like you, where people had, for me in my case, had spoken things over me to make me feel like I was minimized. For
That's right.
you,
Same,
right,
same.
yours was a little bit different, but people came in the way, right? People circumstances were used, I should say, to kind of rob and dim down that light.
Mm,
And once you realize the real truth, right, you can kind of get back to that innocence of who you were designed to be. It's a beautiful feeling.
yeah. I'm working on another book. One of the things, as soon as I got this diagnosis, I decided to start writing my second book. The first one still hasn't been published, still trying to find a publisher. But I'm really going to address the issue of stress and worry and where does it come from? And it's really the thing that kills us. Paul says in Philippians, I only have a very few verses of the Bible memorized. And it's actually a gift because then when the Lord gives me a scripture address, I don't know what it says. And so it's always He's speaking right to me. But I do have a couple. And one of them is Philippians 4. And I'll paraphrase it, be anxious for nothing, but in all things through prayer, supplication, let your request be made known to God, and the peace that surpasses all understanding will guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. Now, in my estimation, you just touched on this in what you just said a minute ago, is that the enemy lies to us and wounds us through other people generally. And because ultimately, when you think about it, we're supposed to be in community. And when the people closest to us or somebody that we trust that actually hurts us, it drives a pretty deep wedge because it's incongruent to our design. And so then what the enemy does is that he wounds us in our youth or in our early adulthood somehow, some way. And there's a myriad of ways. We've all got different variations of the myriad of ways. Then we're anchored into that wounded place. That's why I think counseling always goes back to, okay, let's talk about when you were a kid. They're trying to get back to that place. I don't think they understand what to do with it once you get back there, which is to introduce that kid to Christ. But, they try to fix the child. But at the end of the day, I don't think that's the right answer. But, and then we go through life and we don't realize that a lot of the situations we face in life that are rooted in that situation back there, because every time we get close to something, the devil's got like a grappling hook with a rope and he just pulls on that wound. He just pulls you a little bit to kind of get you to act a certain way. And then you go through life and we've all met people. They're, 40, 50, even their 60s is still talking about their wife that divorced them 25 years ago, or their husband that cheated on them, or their dad that was abusive, or the neighbor that molested them. And I'm not saying all those things aren't horrendous. I lived through those things as a childhood. I lived through just about all of those things as a child. And those things are horrendous. What's more horrendous is that we as Christians, so many Christians, I understand it in the world if you can't get over stuff. But as believers, true believers, why anyone is walking around allowing the person who harmed them, sinned against them, the sins done by them, the sins done to them, is still has control over that person's life, having them live out of that wound. That's the number one strategy of the enemy to get us to live out of the wounds of our past because we cannot experience the love of God when we're living in the past. And here's why. I've thought about this a lot, and the Lord gave me this, and I'm going to preach this someday. If we say in Romans 8, Paul gives a list of things that nothing can separate us from the love of God. He goes through this whole list. Towards the end, it says, nor things present, nor things to come. In all that big long list, he leaves out the past. And here's why I believe that's the case. It wasn't an omission, by an error or something. It was, he intended to. Because Paul, truly understanding a past that had been washed clean of all people. I mean, he was the one killing all the Christians. He understood new life for old. Because when we live out of the past like that, we're saying the blood of Christ that was shed for those sins done to us or done by us was not enough. And therefore, we're living under the consequence of that sin. You don't know what happened to me. And that's how the enemy keeps people from having a vibrant life in Christ. It's the number one strategy. I don't hear anybody talking about it. I'm going to start. That's what I'm going to write this book about. That to live in the past is to put yourself in a position of losing your whole life. And I think Jesus challenges us, whoever will save their life will lose it. I think he's telling us we got to let go of that. Because if you think
Well,
about what
I
I said
think
earlier, think about what I said earlier. The innocent child, before all the stuff got stolen, and he wants us to come as him as that innocent child. Well, you got to let all this go. This has got to be gone. This living out of the past is what's keeping us from being coming to him as a little child. And I don't
yeah.
know. That's just what the Lord's been talking to me a lot about lately, because that's been my whole journey of life.
Yeah, I guess my question on that would be understanding there's a relevance of wisdom that was learned from those
Yeah.
circumstances. So for some people, those individuals are still in their life, right? They can't
Yeah.
necessarily just run from it. And so you have to learn a new way to, navigate in life with that and use that wisdom at the same time being understanding that if that person hasn't done the work. So how do you share, I guess, how to navigate just you can't act like it never happened if that person's still near you because that person, you know, maybe continues to have those behaviors. So,
Well, then you've
it's
got
a
Yeah, I think it comes down to the irreducible core. Love the Lord thy God with all your heart, mind, and soul. Love your neighbor as yourself. And enabling somebody
yeah,
to be abusive to you is not loving yourself.
right.
And so if love is the commodity of the kingdom of God, then relationships are the economy. And that's a original quote by me, by the way. So if relationships are the economy, and we're in a relationship that's basically keeping us stuck in the sin of the past that was done to us, then we have to make a hard choice of potentially walking away from that relationship
Yeah,
because
but
it's not
doing it
love.
in love, and I think there's
Yeah.
I had a
So let's
circumstance
define
and
that.
yeah,
Say
because
again.
I just said it's
You say again, doing it in love. So define what it means to do it in love.
understanding that they are where they're at and that they have admittedly said, "I don't see this for myself. I'm not willing to," right? Knowing that when they say that, like, "This is all on you. I'm not taking ownership. This is all about you." I mean, I think at that point, there's really nothing you can work with on that for them. And you just say, "Unfortunately, you understand that," but you understand that with a level of mercy for them.
Yeah.
And you do it in the love and saying, "Listen, in essence, you might say, they have the ego is a lot for them right now, or the envy is a lot for them right now. And I have mercy for them. I understand that's a human emotion. But within that, unless there's a place of, right, like communal change, I can't
Sure.
force. I can't force that change. So you don't do it in a like, I'm so much better than you. My life's better than you. That's not how we
Yeah.
do it. I'm so much above you. You do it in a way of mercy for them,
Sure.
right? And
Right.
if God is asking you to show grace, that might be, I realize when God has asked me to show grace or taught me about grace, He asked me to give grace to someone. He asked me to learn it by doing it for someone I didn't want to do it for.
Hmm.
Okay. I didn't want to show that person grace, right? It was kind of like that Jonah going into the
Yeah.
no, Jonah going into the whale. Jonah going into the whale. But it was kinda like
Yeah.
Jonah going into the whale. He was like, "These people don't deserve, right,
Hmm.
all of this, and I'm gonna be at risk for doing that." But God asked him to do it anyway, and that's how he taught Jonah. It's really not about the other person. It's about
Mm-mm.
what he's
Never is.
teaching you through
That's right.
in that time. Right? And
That's right.
so when we have to show things like mercy for someone else, we're gonna have to show someone mercy that God's gonna have to supply that within us because maybe we don't want to,
Yeah, well, it comes back to ultimately what Jesus says. He says, "Forgive them, Father; they don't know what they're doing." And I think that's the
right?
hardest. We want mercy for ourselves, and we want justice for those around us. Because at the
Right,
end of the day, most believers are closet little Pharisees, and the people we're the worst Pharisee to is ourselves. And we will beat ourselves up, and we will continue to believe the lies, as you said earlier, that are whispered in our head, and we'll continue to believe the lies that were inflicted upon us through whatever malevolence
right,
he chose to use to visit upon us. And the only way out of that is grace and his mercy and to think that it's anything other than that is another lie from the pit of hell. It's pure grace and pure mercy. That's all that it is.
Mhm.
And there's
Mhm.
nothing I can do technically to separate myself from the love of God. I can grow cold, but I can't be separated because God is love. I don't like when
Right.
people say Jesus could have come down off the cross. No, he couldn't have, because love never fails.
Mm.
So he couldn't have come off the cross because he wasn't doing it
Amen.
out of this sort of, I have to do this to save my people. He did it because of pure abject love, the love
Right.
of the Father, to insert himself into his own creation and take on the penalty for what the creation had done to his creation. It's a profound thought process, really is, when you think about it.
Well, and I say this a lot. I guess the Lord just drives this into me a lot is love in the man's mind is often transactional. You didn't
Yeah,
do this for me, you didn't do that for me, you didn't give me
right.
this, you didn't treat me this way. That's a transactional kind of love. But that's not the love of Christ. The love of Christ is sacrificial. And until
That's right.
you truly understand that it's a sacrifice of your own pride, your own ego, your own comfort, then you don't really understand love, the
That's right.
trueness of love,
That's right.
because that's
Right.
what Jesus did on the cross.
That's right. That's right. And I think the biggest part, like when you read Paul's statement in Corinthians 13, I think the one part that's always the most profound to me in that passage is love keeps no record of wrongs done. And so that's the hardest part for people because we keep a record, you know, and I've been through those types of relationships where the record was being kept against me, and the record should have been being kept the other direction, but I didn't keep the record because that's just how the Lord has wired me. When I say that when somebody tells me that they're sorry for doing something, I actually believe them. Now, if they do it again, then I'm the one at fault because I believed them and now they're still doing the same things. To love somebody that's difficult is very likely means you got to walk away
Yeah.
and to love them well. And I think this idea is that we've got this idea we have to be some sort of a doormat to people that are mistreating us in certain ways. And I think probably the biggest issue is people don't have boundaries. Nobody's taught boundaries. Bang up against other human beings. We're just all learning. And
Mhm.
so,
Right,
it's
but
just
I think there's a way to do boundaries, though. There's a way to do it without coming across like you are all above them. That's not the way to do boundaries. Because I
I
think
think if
about
you're
this quite often, and I actually see how the enemy is using social media lately.
okay.
And he's very much using it in a way of, if you don't bring me perfect peace, if you don't bring me all these perfect things and I'm so deserving, then that's my boundary. Well, no,
Yeah.
I'm not always going to want to apologize to someone, but maybe the Lord's asking me to do it. And that's not
Yeah.
going to be very comfortable.
Yeah.
That's the real
Obedience is better
reality.
than sacrifice.
Correct, correct. And so what I'm trying to share is I think boundaries, when you check yourself, you need to ask yourself, are boundaries done in a way of love and not
Yeah.
punishment?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Because
the
if
question
we're
you ask yourself.
right. If we're trying to get justice out of something or prove a point, then we're looking for control. So all we're doing is we're doing the exact same thing that we feel this other person is doing to us. And like I said, you get to a point where there are some people that I've definitely forgiven, but I certainly can't be around. They're not safe people because they've been forgiven. They said they would not do it again. And then, multiple times later, and finally just have to say, you know what? You're not a trustworthy person for me. You might be great with other people. I don't know. That's not my prerogative to know. Live your life, but I don't need to be in relationship with a person who just, I think I came to this realization when had the spinal infection a few years back was, you know what? I'm just not going to make people feel good about treating me like crap any longer. I don't think that was turning the other cheek as Jesus would have me do, trying to make peace with people that didn't want to have peace. Oh, Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall see God. But, making peace for the sake of peace is no real peace. So, just as you go through life, you begin to learn things. You said earlier that people have to go through their own sort of journey and such. I tell the young people in the church I'm planting right now all the time, I want them to stand on my shoulders. They're going to have their own challenges, but if I can help them avoid, some of the stuff that I had to go through to learn what I've learned, so maybe instead of having to go through something horrendous, they catch it early and they get the lesson a little bit earlier, as so they don't have to go back around the mountain, back around the mountain, back around the mountain. I think that's that's really important that we help other people that are coming. As you say, it's not that you're above or below or you're better or worse. It's just that you've gained some knowledge through some things that maybe people could use. And, I never push it upon anybody. I just, if you want to know some things about some things, ask me some questions. And if it resonates, it resonates. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. There's nothing you can do. But I think for me, I've said this before, Carrie, it's shocking to me the level that people go to destroy their own life and then cry out to God on a Sunday morning at church, why is this happening to me? And you just want to go, well, you know, um, this back here would have helped avoid that. And I don't think most people recognize that we're doing all these silly things that are causing us to have problems, you know?
Yeah, right, like, we have free will. We have free will.
That's
I
right.
actually it's interesting you bring it up because the other day I was so bothered. I noticed a lady, she came into a restaurant, very short story, and she was so frustrated. They were very low staffed. There was a reason why they were low staffed, and she was so bothered that someone wasn't right there serving her because she was in a rush that she waited and huffed and puffed and tried to get the attention. I mean, she spent so much of her energy trying to get this lady's attention. Okay. Then this poor gal comes out. She's easily like 8 months pregnant. I mean, she is ready to go. And there's only one cook. And she's like, we need to order. My goodness, I've just had the worst day ever. And she was just so self absorbed. And I thought to myself, she is creating this dynamic and acting
Mm,
like it's everyone else's fault, but in reality, she had free will. She was not shackled. There was nobody there forcing her to stay there. She could, the time it took and the energy she used, she could have already had her food in the place next door because there were a lot of places that were available that were not backed up. But so she chose a situation that caused her harm, but yet
right.
made it like everybody else was giving her harm. Right.
Yeah.
So
That's
it's a
right.
simple scenario, but it's a real reality that most of us do. We're creating our own harm by misusing our energy and our resources on
Yeah,
time and situations that aren't being fruitful because we're acting like we're a prisoner to our own choice.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I think that people just don't even recognize that they're the one caught. I think if people could actually be outside of themselves and looking in, they would realize we'd all go, my gosh, did anybody actually record that? Seriously, because, I don't know this fascination. Everybody wants to be, recording every little moment of their life because I don't have all those happy go lucky moments most days. I mean, I have great moments, but I'm not with a camera. Oh, here's my moment of joy. You know, I'm not going to do that. But
Maybe you
people really do.
should. Maybe
Maybe
you
I should
should. Now, I
record
will
this
tell you, I'm
journey.
one of those people, but I will tell you something. Actually, when I started doing content creation, there were times where I would dip. I'd be in a lull
Yeah.
and I would look back and I would say, my goodness, look what a beautiful life you live.
Oh,
You're doing
yeah.
all the things you said you wanted to do. And now there's all these moments and you're like, I can't deny it. I had said I wanted to travel. I was like, look at all the places you got to go, and I captured those moments of joy. So,
Yep.
maybe you can reframe that because,
Yeah.
everybody's going to, they're beautiful moments to look back on, you know?
Yeah. Sure.
And that's part of the reason to capture, but I wanna stay on the path of giving you the opportunity to kind of share if somebody else was to listen to this and get a diagnosis and know that they had very minimal chance, right, of recovering from it, or they're full of fear, or they're alone, what would you share with them?
Well, if they're number one, if they're a believer and they have fear, I try to explain the love of Christ to them because the love of God is what casts out, perfect love of God casts out all fear, right? So what are you afraid of? Because most of what we're afraid of is made up in our own heads, honestly. And if you're, as a believer, if you're like, well, I'm afraid there's no heaven, well, then why would you say you believe? It's not that we believe to go to heaven. We believe because he said he was going there and he's going to prepare a place for us. I don't, I've always, my big joke has always been, I'm going to live to 100, my kids know that. And so, um, when you've got that sort of framework inside your head, you tend to not just give in and go. But, I think that what happens is that when malevolence comes to visit us, it's an opportunity for us to get honest. And,
Mhm.
each time it's peeling a little bit more level of the onion off. And and getting truly honest. What are you afraid of missing out on? What's the FOMO, right? What's the fear of missing out?
Mhm.
And, I've thought through that. Do I have a fear of missing out? Yeah, I'd love to see, my kids have kids. Love to see my kids get married. I mean, I would love that. That said, if that doesn't happen, I have to grieve that, and I think that's
Mhm.
part of the process of if what happens is we it doesn't the Lord doesn't heal me, because that's really what's got to happen. Um, if the Lord doesn't heal me, then I get this opportunity to actually leave well.
Mhm.
And I think when you look at it from that perspective, you can either waste your time with regret, which is exactly what the enemy of our souls wants us to do. That's why he keeps us rooted in the sins of the past, rooted in the failures of the past, rooted in the sins done to us in the past, the wounds of the past. That's why he does that. So I think the biggest thing is to choose to not live with regret. I wish I did this. I wish I did that. And I think that if you're facing a situation like this, you want to become completely present, like
Mhm.
completely present. And I have pretty bad days where I can't function. The symptoms are really bad. And on those days, I don't push myself to try to be happy and joyful. This is part of the journey too.
Mhm.
So I think it's just, and don't make any decisions out of fear,
Mhm.
because, what's the acronym for fear? False evidence appearing real. What are you
Mhm.
really afraid of? Well, I'm afraid of leaving my kids. Why? Well, if the reasons are because you don't feel like your kids have got their lives together and you got to be there to make sure everything goes okay, well, maybe the best thing for them is for you to not be there. If you're kind of controlling everything in your kids' lives, that's the wrong reason to want to stay around. So I think you have to really examine your motives. What's your motives? I thoroughly enjoy my children's company. They're young adults, and I enjoy being around them as people. They're good human
Mhm.
beings. So I'm not going to allow the potential that I'm not going to be here very long to take away from the fact that I like to spend time with them now. And I
Mhm.
think if it's something I've been working on for probably 15 years, is living in the present. At the bottom
Mhm.
of my signature, when I send an email, it says, be present, live now, love well. Those are my three things. That's the three things I work on all the time. Am I being present? Am I actually right here where I'm supposed to be right now? Am I living well? And living well means, am I living in a way where I'm expressing love? Be present, live now, love well. Live now is, am I right here, right now? Am I living, and love well? Am I loving people in a way that they feel love? And it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be much. It can be a kind word at the grocery store.
Mhm.
The ultimate call of a Christian is not to believe. The call of a Christian is to become love to the world around them. And you know what? You can evangelize more people than anybody in your life by simply saying hi to somebody, give them a compliment every day. That's all you have to do. I tell people, you know, we should always be sharing Christ everywhere we go. And if necessary, use words. Seriously. And I mean it.
It's true, and I think don't say hi, and by the time someone has a chance to even get out the door, you're already in the bathroom or, it's like, no, only say hi if you're willing to have an exchange. Don't
That's right.
use wasted words just
That's right.
to have to placate people,
That's right.
Another guest shared that, and I thought, "It's so true, we do
Yeah.
that."
Yeah. We
"How are
do.
you?" "Okay, where'd you go?" "I thought you asked me how I was, because I was gonna share, but you
Yeah. That's
are
right.
now gone.
People don't
And
really
so
want
did
to
you
know
really
how.
wanna hear about
That's right.
how I was? Because your actions said differently, right? So
No.
being more mindful with our words, I think
Yes.
is vital.
And not just like you said, these surfacey sort of interactions that make us feel better. I'm not talking about that.
Right.
If you just start asking the Lord every time you go to the grocery store, Lord, show me the person you want me to encourage today, and he's going to illuminate somebody to you, and you're going to walk up and go, I don't know why. Go hey, hi, how are you? I prayed a really simple prayer before I walked in this store. Lord, who can I encourage today? And he showed me you. So what's your name? Hi, Bob. I'm Jeff. I'm Jeffrey. You know, I just want to tell you that I want to encourage you today. I hope things are going well in your life. That people will start talking to you right away. And you'll be
Mhm.
shocked at what comes out, but just encourage them. That's all it has to take. Because you think about it, most people have had an encouraging word, let alone a physical touch, non sexual physical touch, whether they're married or not, in weeks. And how often do we get an uplifting word? How often do we have somebody tell us that, you're really doing well, or I'm
Mhm.
proud of you? You know, I don't think we need as much as we think we need to thrive in relationships. I think we need to stop demanding that somebody else fill our cup and get our cup filled from him. And then we've got plenty to overflow onto other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But a lot of
Well,
people
thank
love,
you.
a lot of people love in the Christian church because what they are is they're really needy and they want people to recognize them. They want people to pay attention to them. And that's a wrong motive. Dying to self means dying to self, whatever that self looks like, whether you're the sweetest little church mouse, gal, but deep down inside, you're completely insecure and you're doing all this extra service that everybody gives you louds upon you. You're doing so great. You're doing so great. You're such a service to our church because you really just want a friendship. So you're working yourself to the bone because you just want to have friends, and all you do is you're doing all this work. You're isolating yourself more and more. We really got to look at what we're doing in life. There's a ton of activity going on in the context of the church that has nothing to do with God. It's just busy work. And I think church would be well served if they started asking the question, Lord, what are you saying, and what are you asking me to do? That's it.
Yeah.
So I asked him that question. I said, what are you saying, and what are you asking me to do? He said, you're not going to die. Walk the path.
There
So
you go.
that's what I'm going to do
That's right.
because what other choice is there?
No, just live well, serve well, love well. I think you're
Yeah.
right on Pat, and it's a great reflection to have those listeners listen in and say, if they do have fear, lean into that and ask
Yeah.
themselves the deeper questions. You
Yeah.
know, if you're fearful that you don't have things in order, well, get things in order. You're fearful you haven't, had those relationships. It's a gift of time to be very present, and that's a great way to look at it. So, I wanted to thank you for your time very much, and I'm so glad that the Lord orchestrated us to get back together. And thank you for everyone listening to the podcast. And where can we find you on social media if we want to follow
Uh,
you?
you can find me on Instagram. It's the Fit Rev, FITREV. I'm the Fit Rev. Find my website at fitrevelation.com. Yeah, I think that's my two main social media things. I'm on
All
Facebook too,
righty.
but yeah, just the basics. Keep it going.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for your time.
All right, Carrie. Lord
All right.
bless you.
Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye.